What it is, my 10-0 Peace and Grease here, and today we are doing the Kuba weapon review. Now, the obvious question that I had, and you may have it as well, is will there be any more Kuba weapons added to the Kuba arsenal? And I think this is a really good question because obviously I hope that this video isn't going to be premature and in 2 months time they're going to be adding more Kuba weapons. Although I will say, yet again, I am still holding out for a Kubacheck, particularly now with the impending changes to status effect and how that's going to impact shotguns. I'm hoping that the Kubacheck, if we ever get one, is still going to make that weapon viable. Fingers crossed anyway. But never say never. At this point, my assumption, best guesstimate, is that the next portion of the Kuba-esque type of updates we're going to get are probably going to center around the new Kuba-style enemies, which are going to be Corpus and their weapons. Again, never say never. Nobody can really say for sure what we're going to get. Obviously, we are going to be getting yet another patch or two for the Kubacheck system. So we always have that to look forward to continue to improve the system. So a few things to keep in mind before we get started. And the first thing is I do have ribbon mods for some of these Kuba weapons, but I am not going to utilize them. If I have a Kuba weapon, or a ribbon for a particular Kuba weapon, I will show you the build to illustrate that I am not running the ribbon because it's just not a fair comparison. All of these tests will be conducted in the same exact manner, meaning they will all be utilizing 3 level 170 heavy gunners. Now I will not have AI pause, but I will have invincibility to turn on because I will be talking while we are doing these tests. And each one of these tests will be conducted in the same exact manner with as little deviation from it as possible. A few things to keep in mind here. And that is that Kuba weapons can go to a max rank of 40 once you install 5 Forma into them. You must do that if you want the MR from these weapons. But do any of these Kuba weapons actually need 5 Forma? No, they do not. At most, I would say the highest amount of Forma required to fit a build is probably about 3 Forma, but on average 1 to 2. Now, what do you get if you get these to max rank? Well, not a damn thing, with the exception of the MR. Unfortunately, as I've said many times, MR is a dead system, and that in and of itself is not enough of a carrot for most players to actually want to get these to max rank. All of my Kuba weapons are at max rank, and I do have every single one of them. And in some cases, I've had multiples of the same Kuba weapon. And that's what you're going to see here. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is based upon the progenitor of your Lich, which is going to be the Warframe you choose to create your Lich from a larvaling, it is going to give you a weapon bonus. That weapon bonus can be the bare bones, rock bottom, irrelevant 25%, as low as that goes, up to a max of 60%. Now, thankfully, with the recent Kuba Lich update, instead of relying on RNG to get us to that 60% max, we are now able to infuse the same Kuba weapons into each other to slowly and steadily make that climb to that max of 60% bonus weapon damage. But fair warning, most of my Kuba weapons are kind of all over the board. I have some at 27%, I have a couple that are at 60%, and everything in between. So that will obviously be a factor. Furthermore, a few of my weapons actually have weapon bonuses that aren't going to help me at all in this test, and I'll make that clear when we get there. So for starters, we're going to start with the Kuba Shieldig, which is the only Kuba melee weapon currently in the game, and then we're going to move it to the Kuba Ayanga, which is currently the only Kuba arc gun weapon in the game as of this moment. So let's get started first with the Kuba Shieldig. Now the Kuba Shieldig is a big hammer, but it is a very good hammer. Now you can actually build this for quick attacks, or you can build it for heavy attacks. For this video, I will be doing quick attacks because heavy attacks are still kind of broken with some weapons. So I don't think it's fair to kind of come in here with a heavy attack build on this weapon like this, because many weapons can one bang most of these enemies. And then as a result, what have you proved? Well, nothing at all. Now the reason I go with 3 instead of just 1 is because it's more consistent. There's always that element of RNG involved with these weapons whenever we're talking about proccing status or getting those crit hits. So 3 gives me a nice consistent baseline, whereas if I just use 1, you could really get lucky with RNG and get those crit hits and get those status procs, and it doesn't give you actually a really nice baseline. So that's why I choose 3. But there you go. That was the Kuba Schildig. Very solid hammer. Can hit multiple enemies with one swing. Responds well to a heavy attack build or a quick attack build. Either way. Completely capable weapon right there. So now let's go to the Kuva Ayanga. Simulate the same 3 level 170 heavy gunners. Now, do I consider the Kuva Ayanga a, air quotes, bad weapon? No, I don't. Do I think it particularly shines? Well, it really depends on the setting. Keep in mind that DE did kind of nerf down a lot of the art guns to make Railjack feel better. And as I've said many times, never ever nerf something down to make something else feel better in-game. It's the worst possible scenario. And as a result, unfortunately, the Railjack weapons don't feel good. Now, art guns feel pretty much useless as heavy weapons. But with that being said, it's always nice to have multiple tools for various tasks. Case in point, if you were to ask me just prior to Profit Taker's release if I thought the Corvus was a bad, air quotes, art gun, I would have told you, yeah, it's not as good as the others. However, with the introduction of Profit Taker, the Corvus actually shines in that particular task, as does the Velocitus, which is another art gun that I don't typically use very often because it's just not that good. But against Profit Taker limbs, works incredibly well. Similarly, the art gun, the Singus, if you would have asked me, I would have told you it was kind of a medium type of art gun. Not the best, but certainly not the worst. However, the Singus shines in Railjack. The point that I'm making here quite simply is while the Ayanga may not look very good as a heavy weapon, keep in mind that the Ayanga works just fine in Arcwing missions and it works pretty decently in Railjack missions. Again, multiple tools for multiple tasks, and this is why I get so confounded whenever DE tries to make everything the same, for example, like Arcwings. It's okay to have variety. It's okay to have multiple tools for multiple jobs. The Kuba Ayanga will work fine in any of those settings. Are there some weapons that will actually outshine it? Of course there are. Everything in Warframe is similar to that. But that is, in a nutshell, the Kuva Ayanga. Overall, a solid weapon. I would not hesitate to run it if needed. So at this point, we're going to talk about the Kuva Agris, and we are going to talk about the Kuva Brac. Now, I do have a Kuva Agris ribbon, but you'll notice I am not running it in this build. The Kuva Agris ribbon is down here in my inventory, but not on my build. I want to make that clear. I don't think it's a fair comparison to show a Kuba weapon with a ribbon mod when I don't have ribbon mods for everything, or at least a similar ribbon mod for everything. So again, we're going to call up these 3 level 170 heavy gunners for the Kuva Agris. I think these... We'll put one more shell on this gal. Nope, she couldn't... I was expecting her to slash out. Okay, she should now. There we go. So that's the Kuva Agris. Perfectly serviceable weapon, and I think you'll be seeing a lot more of these once the self-damage has been removed. So perfectly good weapon there as well. So at this point, we're going to move to the Kuva Brac. Now, funny story about the Kuva Brac here. The Kuva Brac was probably about the 6th or 7th weapon that I got in the Kuva Lich system when it first came out. And unfortunately, my Kuva Brac is set up with magnetic as well as corrosive. The point that I'm trying to make is the weapon bonus that I'm getting here on my Kuva Brac is not helping me in any way, shape, or form. So if you were able to use a progenitor and get a good bonus, a good amount, as well as a good type, the Kuva Brac will be very good. As you can see, this Kuva Brac has no problem as a secondary taking down 3 level 170 heavy gunners, even with a magnetic bonus. So I think you get the idea of how good it could be with a decent bonus, and it truly can be. So let's move on to the next Kuva weapons. And the next one for the primary is going to be the much talked about Kuva Brac, and it's going to be the Kuba Kraken. Now, I do not have a ribbon for the Brac nor the Kraken, which that's okay. We'll show these to you anyway, and we'll see what you think. I think you'll really be impressed by the Kuva Brac, so let's find out. That should be all that it takes to get rid of these heavy gunners. Oh, viral wore off. There we go. That'll do it. Now the Kuba Brac is very strong. And again, once the removal of self-damage is implemented, you are probably going to be seeing a hell of a lot more of these in-game. Now, this begs the question, is there going to be an impending nerf at some point in the future if this particular weapon kind of takes over the missions? There's always a chance of that, but I say, I don't sweat it until that time comes. Obviously, ribbon disposition is going to plummet pretty hard, which right now ribbons are pretty up there. They're skyrocketed pretty well for this weapon, and that's no wonder. Now, unfortunately, if you like the Barrow Katir arrow skin like myself, unfortunately, it is glitched with the Brac, as you can see here. Hopefully, DE is on it as far as fixing this goes. If not, I may go ahead and submit a ticket. But yeah, it's particularly annoying when you select a skin and this is the result. So let's move on to the Kuba Kraken. Now, I'm going to be honest and say from the get-go, I was never a fan of the regular Kraken. So when the Kuba Kraken was released, I wasn't that excited about it. All things being considered, though, the Kuba Kraken is a perfectly serviceable secondary. And keep in mind, it's not as if I'm taking this against level 30, regular Grineer fodder. These are actually levels 170 heavy gunners. So it's not as if these are lightweights. And the Kuba Kraken is doing, holding its own in this regard. Are there secondaries that are going to perform better? Sure, absolutely. No argument here. But is this type of damage something that you should be ashamed of? No, absolutely not. The Kuba Kraken is performing admirably in this particular case. Again, I do not have a ribbon for this particular weapon. I imagine if you did have a ribbon, you would probably be pretty happy with this secondary. Again, can easily deal with level 170 heavy gunners. Moving on to the next primary, this is going to be the Kubacheck Core. And for the secondary, it's going to be the Kuba Core, another Kuba weapon that has been much discussed, and for good reason. But we'll get to that momentarily. Let's talk about, first, the Kubacheck Core. Again, I do not have a ribbon mod for either one of these weapons. Funny story, I used to have Kuba Core weapons. But at some point, I ended up transmuting those or selling those and no longer have them. Wish I had them back now, that's for sure. So the Kubacheck Core really shines with headshots. It has a slow fire rate and it has a very, very long, miserably so, in fact, reload animation. With all things being considered, though, I would not be ashamed to run the Kubacheck Core. It is a very overall solid weapon, as you can see. Now, the downside to the Kubacheck Core isn't the weapon's fault. It's actually part of the core game mechanics of Warframe, and that is headshots. Headshots are a really sketchy, coin flippy type of item in Warframe, because If you have an enemy that just turns their head slightly, or they turn their back to you, or if you're shooting downward at an enemy from above, sometimes flip a coin. Those may not count as headshots. And if you've ever had to unlock a ribbon mod with a challenge centering around headshots, you know precisely what I'm talking about. That's not the weapon's fault. And with this gun truly shining when you get those headshots, the core game mechanic of headshots is in a bad place right now. And it has been in a bad place for a long time. So unfortunately, that's the biggest hurdle for the Kubacheck Core. While it's good, the core game mechanics let this weapon down, sadly. So it's one that I tend to not use very often. So with that said, let's move on to the Kuba New Core and find out why so many people talk so highly of it. And there you have it. I don't think you really need to say anything else other than that. Yeah, the Kuba New Core is pretty doggone amazing as far as a secondary weapon goes. As you can see, easily toasted those 3 level 170 heavy gunners. No problem whatsoever. Now, I will tell you, my personal favorite location to use the Kuba New Core is when I go into infested missions, because, as you already know, infested missions love to mob rush you. And you go into an infested salvage, you will be laughing maniacally at the carnage that the Kuba New Core can just devastate infested enemies. It's fantastic. Now, it doesn't tend to shine very good against singular targets. It does work okay though, but where it truly does shine is against those mob enemies. So by all means, give that a go. It's a very fun weapon to use, and just watch just the carnage that ensues. So let's move on to the next primary and secondaries. That is going to be the Kuba Comb, as well as the Kuba Twin Stubbas. Now, oddly enough, the Kuba Twin Stubbas don't get enough attention. I don't know why. They should, but they don't. Now, the important bit that you need to know about both of these weapons is they have this ability to absolutely wipe out all of your ammo reserves. So, if you like the Kuba Comb and if you like the Kuba Twin Stubbas, you better run some type of ammo mutation mod and or Carrier Prime, because you're gonna need it with both of these weapons. Now, the important bit to keep in mind with my Kuba Comb is that it was a primary Kuba weapon that I was having a hell of a time actually procuring. Just couldn't seem to get a lich with it. This was prior to the last Kuba lich changes, I should say. My buddy Roams, thank you Roams, hooked me up with a lich with a comb. Unfortunately, the only comb that he had left was like 27% weapon bonus, and it was magnetic. Yeah, the point that I'm making is what you're going to see of the Kuba Comb here is pretty doggone good, but it can be better. My bonus is so low, it is irrelevant. It does me no good here. Furthermore, it's magnetic. Now, I do also have a corrosive build on this to offset that magnetic a little bit, but unfortunately, really, I'm not getting any weapon bonus whatsoever in this test. So, with the good weapon bonus, the point being, you can probably get this thing to perform way, way, way better. Alright, so let's start with the Kuba Comb. Now, I will tell you that one of the mods I'm not running that I do recommend that you should is that a fire rate mod. The Kuba Comb, once you start throwing a fire rate mod on it, does fantastic amounts of work. So, unfortunately, I am not running one. As you can see, I have a very low fire rate. I do not have a ribbon mod because once the Kuba Comb was announced, I sold mine for a pretty fair amount of plat. Yeah. And so, unfortunately, I don't have a comb ribbon any longer. But, as you can see right there, Kuba Comb performs very, very well. And if you happen to get a really good weapon bonus, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with this weapon. So let's move into the Kuba Twin Stubbas. Similarly, these have an ability to just absolutely empty your ammo reserves very quickly. But I really don't know why this doesn't get enough love. The Kuba Twin Stubbas just quite simply seem to be ignored by many people. I don't really know why though, because it actually performs very well. I mean, just look at those, just look at it just devastate that pool right there, just gone. Alright, so hopefully she should make a comeback here somewhere behind me. Fortunately, she fell off. So we're just going to hopefully wait for her and have her re-emerge somewhere. There she is. So there you go. That is the Kuva twin stubbas. They work very well. Don't get a lot of attention. And this is a secondary that I've actually considered buying a ribbon mod. I do not have a ribbon mod for the Kuva twin stubbas, but I am considering trying to pick one up because I am a fan of them. Moving on to our next primary and secondary, we're going to go with the Kuba Kraken. And for the secondary, we are going with the Kuba Seer. This is going to be our final Kuba secondary for this test. Now, a lot of people actually poo-poo on the Kuba Seer, but I think I can surprise you with this one. The Kuba Kraken is a no frills, no BS, no flashy lights or blinky buttons. And that's okay, because you know what? It works just freaking great. So let's start with the Kuba Kraken, and then we'll move into the Kuba Seer. Now, I do have a ribbon for the Kuba Kraken, but I am not running it. Again, it's not a fair test if I did. I will show you that after we finish this particular test. And there you have it. Kuba Kraken, just bread and butter, but you know what? It works. I'm going to go Todd Howard on this. Yep, it just works. So let me show you my build for the Kuba Kraken and verify for you that there is no ribbon mod, but I do happen to own one. So there you have it. I do have a ribbon mod, but it is not currently equipped. If nothing else, this should show you that anybody out there can have a decent Kuba weapon. You don't have to have a ribbon mod. Obviously, ribbon mods do help you in certain settings, but in this test, I refuse to run them. Now, I did initially have Vigilante armaments on here and threw on Vigilante supplies to further enhance my... Oh, there's my Vigilante armaments. Okay, it's still on there. Never mind, disregard. But so I am running Vigilante supplies, but I'm not really running it for the ammo as much as I am for the enhanced crit hits. So pairing Vigilante armaments with Vigilante supplies does that. So there you go. So that's what I installed in the ribbon mods location is Vigilante armaments to bump up those crit hits. So let's move on to the Kuba Seer. That's going to be our final Kuba secondary. And again, I think that you will be pleasantly surprised by the Kuba Seer. A lot of people talk crap about this weapon. There you go. I don't know why so many people hate on the Kuba Seer. It has no problem as a secondary absolutely destroying level 170 heavy gunners. Not one, not two, but three. Don't know why there's so much hatred for this thing. And believe you me, I should be, if anything, I should be one of the people that actually absolutely hate this weapon, because when the Kuba Lich system initially launched, I ended up with like 58 of these damn things, couldn't get rid of them. But it works so doggone well. Now, I will tell you that the important note about the Kuba Seer is that it has a little area of effect explosion, but it is so minuscule that it's worthless to actually shoot at an enemy's feet. And believe you me, I get it. I do the same thing. It's a subconscious thing. When you play certain types of games enough, you get in this habit with explosive weapons at shooting at someone's feet, letting the blast travel upwards at them, so you're hitting multiple enemies at one time. But if you do that with the Kuba Seer, it is going to perform very poorly because the blast is too small to actually do anything. So, when you're shooting at an enemy, you want to make sure that you're actually shooting them, like most weapons, in the head or the upper torso. Let that blast travel through them there. And if enemies happen to be close enough, shoulder to shoulder, to take some of that blast damage, then so be it. But you definitely want to shoot the enemy with this. So that wraps up the secondary, the melee, as well as the arc gun Kuva review, but we still have some primaries to go through. And so we will do that now. So the next Kuba weapon we are going to be using is the Kuba Toncore. Now, I used to get Toncore ribbon mods all the damn time, and I ended up transmuting most of them because most people weren't buying them. But the Kuba Toncore is an OG weapon. It's a weapon that was always really freaking strong prior to the nerf, And there was a big nerf that pretty much just obliterated the Toncore and made it kind of a useless weapon. So is the Kuba Toncore as good as the pre-nerf Toncore? I don't really think it matters because the Kuba Toncore performs very, very, very well. I would not be ashamed to run this weapon in any type of mission, particularly when I'm going to have lots of big, large groups of enemies, like in an arbitration, for example. It works really well in that setting. And again, this is a weapon I think that you'll start seeing more and more in other missions once the self-damage is removed. And I think that that is really going to play a part in seeing these explosive weapons start to shine. Let's move on to our next primary Kuba weapon. And that is going to be the Dragoon. Now, of all of the Kuba weapons, the one weapon that I tend to dislike the most is the Dragoon. I know there's a following. A lot of people like the Dragoon, and if you do, that's fine. I'm not judging you for it. I personally am not a fan of the Kuba Dragoon, or the regular Dragoon for that matter. But you know what? It works very well. And there is lots of slash surrounding this particular weapon. And okay, she fell off the map. So hopefully she'll re-emerge here. Either that, or she will slash out. Oh, there you are. There we go, she'll slash out now. So the Kuba Kraken, even though I'm not necessarily a fan, it works, and it works just fine. There are no real qualms about running this. Really good slash-based primary. And we're going to move on to the Kuba Hind. Now, I don't have any more Hind ribbons. Again, this is a weapon that if you'd have told me prior to it becoming a Kuba-fied weapon, I would have told you you're full of crap if you told me that this weapon was good. But it really is. It's very Tiburon Prime-esque because you have multiple different fire rates. You've got burst fire, semi-auto, and full auto. In fact, I'm going to drop one of each of these three 170 heavy gunners with each fire rate. It performs very well, and I really wish that I could actually get back some of my Hind ribbons now, because I used to get them all the damn time, and I used to just scrap them or transmute them, and now I wish I could have them back. Sadly, they're gone. And the Kuba Hind ribbons have begun to climb pretty hard in value, and for good reason, because this is a pretty damn good weapon. And I think in almost every regard, it almost outshines the Tiburon Prime. So we're going to start with burst fire on this first Grenier Heavy Gunner. There we go. We will now switch to semi-auto to take out this second. And we will now switch to full auto to take out this third. Nope. And final heavy gunner. And she should slash out as she does. And there you go. Kuba Hind, very, very good. Now, believe it or not. I know. I'm stunned by that too, but yeah. Pretty damn good. So we'll move on to the next primary, which is going to be the final Kuba weapon in the Kuba arsenal, and that is the Kuba Coretech. Now, I actually kind of dug the regular Coretech, so when I actually received the Kuba Coretech, I was really excited about it, and I'm glad I am. Now, the Kuba Coretech has two fire rates. It has the semi-auto fire rate mode, and it has full auto. But honestly, all I use is the regular fire rate. I don't use full auto. As you can see, Kuba Coretech works extremely well. So let's summarize here. What I said at the beginning of the video is very true. I really don't feel that there is a bad Kuba weapon in the bunch. I think that they all perform well at various different types of tasks. And any one of these Kuba weapons, and I mean any one of them, will get you through the star chart and beyond. I would have no qualms about running any of these weapons in arbitration or in the sortie. I would have no doubts at all. They all perform pretty doggone well, given they have a decent build. And I wouldn't be ashamed of using any of them. So which one do you go for? Well, that's entirely up to you. What type of weapons do you like? If you like the auto rifles, then perhaps a Hind or a Coretech or the Carrack should be the weapon for you. If you prefer those burst fire weapons, well, you really are only left with one weapon, and that would be the Hind as well. You've got a whole arsenal to choose from, and you know what? As I said at the beginning, these are becoming the meta because they are so damn strong. So hopefully that helps you out. Hopefully it clears up a lot of the information about Kuva weapons and gets you out there and gets you picking up some of these weapons. Let me know down in the comment section what you think and which one are your favorites. And until next time, peace and grease.